The 2021 fantasy season is over. Hopefully you won a championship, or at least we're in the playoffs and competitive. Regardless, we're going to be looking and breaking down busts and breakouts on the channel, starting at the quarterback position. So this is based off of ADP. What does ADP mean? Average draft position. So based off of last year's drafts, who was a bust, who was a breakout? So quarterbacks, who was our first breakout of the year, Badaki?
Our first quarterback breakout of the year is Justin Herbert, Mr. Herbie. ADP was quarterback 8, finished as quarterback 2 on the year, which is absolutely fantastic. He broke the Chargers single season record touchdown record. So he did fantastic. He was going off. I mean,
he was so humble about it too. Like when it happened, they were trying to show him on the jumbo screen. He was like, don't show me.
Please.
No, he balled out, man. He balled out. That's the kind of return that you want. That's what we call a breakout. Yep. Quarterback 8, finishing quarterback 2. How does his stats compare, though? I mean, I feel like he had a much better year. I think only him and Tom Brady threw over 5,000 passing yards this year.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, 5,000 passing yards this year, 5,014 with 38 passing touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns, and obviously 1,000 more yards from 2020. He had 4,000 passing yards last year with 31 passing yards in the season before. So it's a significant improvement from the year before. And I just see that continuing to grow and grow as he develops and gets older.
Yeah, definitely. The big question for next year, because now we're looking at next year, 2022, is what's going to happen with Mike Williams. You and I went back and forth about this on the podcast, Badaki.
Correct.
I think he's going to stay. You think he might potentially leave. But that's really going to be a big factor going into drafts next year. Is Mike Williams there? Why? Because he's that big body. You can throw the ball to him wherever he is, and he can go up and get the ball. That's something that if they lose, might be a big deal. You're still going to draft him high, but where do you see his ADP being next year? Is he top 5?
Yeah, he's definitely top 5. He was already top 5 for me coming into this past year, and I think he's going to continue to be top 5 for me going into next year. So look, I think the mobile quarterbacks go first. Obviously, your Kylers, your Patrick Mahomes, your Lamars, those guys are all going to go way before him. But he's more of a pocket passer. But we did see some legs from Justin Herbert this year. So
yeah, there was one game where he almost had 100 rushing yards.
Yeah, he balled out.
I think that was versus the Steelers, yeah.
I think it's a great opportunity for Justin Herbert, especially in the top 5 in quarterbacks next year. I see that continuing.
I love it. All right, Joe Burrow is our second and last breakout at the quarterback position this year in 2021. He was drafted as the quarterback 13, finished as the quarterback 7. So that's a really, really good return, a very good value if you had him. And a lot of people probably won their championships because of Joe Burrow.
Absolutely.
In the fantasy playoffs, week 15 to 17, he was the most valuable quarterback in all of fantasy. 2 games over 40 points.
I agree.
Week 16, 46. Week 17, 42 points. A lot of championship teams had Joe Burrow. Great year as well. Over 4,600 passing yards, 34 touchdowns, and 2 rushing touchdowns. The conversation before the year was, is he going to be the same person after that injury?
Yeah, I mean, another conversation was that should they have drafted Jamar Chase or Penei Sewell? And I think it's clear that they drafted the right guy in Jamar Chase. And Joe Burrow, I mean, look, you get your weapons in Jamar Chase, and now you solidify this offensive line, and maybe there is some decent pieces coming into the draft, or maybe you trade for somebody, or you pick up somebody off a free agent wires. Like I think there's so much a good foundation now for Joe Burrow and his weapons to build, and he looked great. He was rushing a little bit. I mean, it's not a lot. I mean, 2 rushing touchdowns, but you saw some glimpses of him running. But every time he ran, we were like, oh, careful.
Yeah, the projection of this team and Joe Burrow into the future looks really bright. Just get a better offensive line. There are weapons everywhere, and ultimately Chase and Higgins really elevated his value in fantasy this year. ADP in 2022, this next year's draft, I see him being a top 8 quarterback. I almost view him like how Stafford was drafted last year. Not drafted in the top 5, but has top 5 potential.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, kind of building off what we said about Justin Herbert, you see those mobile quarterbacks, the Lamar, the Patrick, the Kyler Murrays, and then it's Justin Herbert, then it's Joe Burrow. I think it's going to be Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow going back to back potentially in next year's drafts.
Yeah, honorable mentions at the quarterback position this year for like a good value. Tom Brady, Jalen Hurts, both returned great value based off of where you drafted them. We're now going to talk about busts. And to be clear, none of these quarterbacks are busts as players or even for fantasy next year. Just this year, based off of where you drafted them, their ADP, they were busts based off of their ADP. Dak Prescott is the first bust based off of ADP. His ADP, he was drafted as a quarterback 6. That's middle of the 4th round. He finished as a quarterback 11. That's the beginning of the 7th round. Is where you actually would have gotten proper value. And honestly, you and I talked about this on the podcast, but the main issue with Dak this year is inconsistencies. 5 games under 15 points, 5 games over 30. So there were some games where he lost you weeks, some games where he won you weeks, but the inconsistencies were too much this year.
Yeah, it was a lot of up and down. And I think another thing we spoke about on the podcast was that their defense was a lot better than what we expected coming into the season. They didn't really make significant moves besides Michael Parsons in the offseason.
Yeah.
And then they drafted Michael Parsons. Like, well, that's good, but is that enough? And I think it was, because they made a huge difference. They got a lot of turnovers, which kind of maybe led to Dak Prescott being within the 20, maybe within the 10, and then just having Zeke run the ball in or Tony Pollard run the ball in. So it wasn't a massive production from Dak Prescott, and a lot of inconsistencies. But I mean, it's hard. It's so hard to kind of really evaluate Dak Prescott, especially coming off of that injury last year. He wasn't as mobile. It's so many things.
Based off the injury, he played well. But I think one thing that we have to note is that the rushing upside, is not there. In his career, he's averaged 5 rushing touchdowns per year. This year, he only had 1. And I don't think we're going to see much rushing upside going forward. I think we have seen a slight drop in his athleticism, and maybe the weapons around him are just better. He doesn't need to rush. Next year, I see him being in the top 8 again. Someone that might return value. Hard to know for sure. And the last group of people who we consider bust, I can't remember an offseason where there was more hype around rookie quarterbacks.
Right.
If you drafted a rookie quarterback this year, it didn't pan out in redraft leagues. If you took a chance on Trevor, Trey, Justin Fields, it just didn't pan out. All these guys didn't return their ADP, and you shouldn't have really had any of them on your roster. None of them returned value. With Trevor, Urban, it was a disaster. I don't even think we can evaluate him at this point.
I agree.
What about Trey? What happened with Trey Lance, though? Let me ask you about Trey.
For Trey Lance, look, there's just no opportunity, to be completely honest. I mean, when you saw him, he came into the game and he was kind of, you saw glimpses and then that's it. You know, and it's like, you know what, Jimmy G, we're going back to Jimmy G. So I think that's what it was. And another question is will Jimmy G return? We spoke about it on the podcast. I think the only way he returns is if he wins the Super Bowl. If he does, then wow. Then that would be whole nother conversation. But we do believe Trey Lance is going to be the future of this team, especially next year. And then Justin Fields, obviously.
Yeah.
A guy that
Fields.
We were really high on. You were really high on Justin Fields.
Yeah. Love Justin Fields. I still love Justin Fields in Dynasty and projecting him into the future. But the reality is there was a shit show in Chicago this year. Up and down, injuries, the rib injury, everything was up and down, including the weapons. Allen Robinson was injured in and out, and Darnell Mooney was really the only bright side of this offense this entire year. The good news, Matt Nagy's gone.
Exactly. Matt Nagy's gone. You don't have to worry about anything. All the bad play calling is out the window, out of the building, out of Chicago. I mean, Justin Fields is going to have a field day, surely.
Hopefully, coming up in the next season, they get a coach that can actually utilize him properly. These quarterbacks, again, are not bad quarterbacks. None of these rookies we're calling bust. Just this year, based off their ADP, their value did not return. Those are our bust and breakouts of the year. Let us know in the comments if you have any questions.
Yo, what's good? Thanks for watching. We got a lot more videos.
A lot more.
If you want more videos.
Watch it.
You can also subscribe.
Right now.
If you want to.
You need to.
And lastly, don't forget that you can sign up to support the show and get exclusive content by going to patreon.com/fantasylandfam.